So, welcome. My name is John Chittum. I am one of the organizers of Breaking In, and this meetup is to help people get into the industry, find new roles in the industry, talk about anything with technology, and by industry I very broadly mean the tech industry, which can mean many different things to many different people, which is why one thing we've been focusing on lately is how do we get people to understand all the different parts of that industry. So we've done talks in the past where various people in the tech industry have spoken specifically about their jobs, and now we're moving into more focused discussions on what are different parts of the industry. So we had a meetup in November that was tech writing. So helping people understand what is tech writing, how to get into tech writing. It's an area that is seeing a fair amount of growth lately as organizations realize engineers probably shouldn't be writing documentation. And so today we're going to talk about what is DevOps. This comes up because I myself have been in these types of roles for almost the entire time I've been in technology, and co-presenter today, George, has also been in these roles for quite a lot. So my super intro on me, other than being the organizer, I work at Canonical. That is the company that is the maker of Ubuntu. So if you use the Ubuntu operating system as a desktop or as a server image, especially, I'll say this, if you're using it in any of the clouds, I probably helped make that. I specifically work on making the cloud images. So now over to George.
Good morning. George Hip. I work at VML Y&R, which is in Kansas City. It's a BXCX marketing firm. I work in the technology organization, specifically TechOps. I'm a group director over there. I recently moved out, about 4 years ago, from Connecticut, where I worked in healthcare. I was supporting United Healthcare and Optum with their implementations of everything. And before that, I worked at United Technologies, which is specifically Pratt & Whitney, and they build jet engines. And I assisted them with their asset management, digital workflows, and all the stuff that goes into making the jet engines look good. We're trying to show them to people. So that's my quick background. I also... So when I came out 4 years ago, this is the smallest company I've ever worked for. So now I've got a pretty broad range of, 200,000 employees down to 1,200 employees, then back up to 10,000 employees. So got a pretty broad range of what it looks like in different organizations. And I work with, in my role, I work with organizations like Ford, Sherwin-Williams, United Rentals, some large companies. So I see how they do their stuff also. So I have a pretty broad exposure to the technology field in general.
Yep. And I similarly have the same tech journey. Previous to getting into tech, I worked mostly in academia, so I'm used to that wild environment, and working lots of freelance jobs. And then I went to Akamai Technologies, which is, as a pure tech company, fairly large. It's like 6,000 employees. And now I'm at Canonical, which is a small-ish company, probably about 500 employees now. But I directly work with, my direct working is Oracle and IBM. I own those technical accounts with those two clouds. But I've also worked with Google and AWS, so Google and Amazon. So I also have a big insight into how some of those orgs run or don't run, depending on size and age. So today we're going to talk about what is DevOps. It is the eternal question on everyone's mind. It's a word that's used everywhere. There's other words like it as well that we'll talk a little bit about, but that is the goal. So what are we doing today? We're going to have a topic, large topic that we've kind of bucketed into several broad areas, and then We're going to roll through points. These are discussion points. They're questions, so feel free to unmute and ask questions as we go, or raise your hand. I should be able to see that in these fun audience tools, I hope. And then we'll have even more takeaways at the end with lots of open dialogue. We have lots of time to ask any free-form questions that maybe we didn't get to, or other areas you'd like to talk about. So,
I don't even know how to raise my hand, so I'm probably just going to have to, I don't know if anyone knows how to raise their hand. Maybe just coming off mute or raising your hand in the video.
Yeah.
You have your video going.
Think raise your hand is in the
It's definitely in Teams.
top right. It also depends what browser you're on.
Oh, okay.
So the Google Meet does work best with Chrome and Chromium based products. All right. So the buckets, the big areas, we're going to talk about organization. We're going to talk about culture. And we're going to talk about tools. So those are kind of the three big areas of when people talk about DevOps, what do they mean? Sometimes they mean organization, sometimes they mean culture, sometimes they mean tools, sometimes they mean all three. I think George and I can agree that it should mean all three, essentially. But really the first two, and then tools are the things that make the other two work. And there's our happy butler who's going to help us through this. I should have automated this all with Jenkins just to prove the point, but I didn't. Organization. It's organized, right? Subways, very organized. Subways also are like pipelines, which is another buzzword, right? So, multi-levular jokes today. So, what does organization mean when they say DevOps? So, what do you think, George?
Oof. There's some organizations that create a department that's called DevOps that normally just turns into the operations automation department, and sometimes they become their own silo and they don't necessarily work with anyone. So what they mean in that type of organization is a place that concentrates on automating our operational stuff, which isn't really DevOps. Then there's other places like where I work, our organization is called TechOps, which is technology operations. And we have DevOps as a belief system, a culture. So we work, for us, when we say DevOps, we mean willingness to work across boundaries with developers, with QA, with whomever, to make stuff, to integrate. We're integrators, like to make stuff work. And some organizations, when they say DevOps, it's very aspirational. It is like, we want to DevOps all the things. And what that means is like, they don't even know. It's just like, people are doing it. They automatically get like 80% increase in profits. We need to do that. So let's DevOps the things. And they said, what? Jenkins, we need Jenkins. So who knows Jenkins? All right, let's DevOps. So I think it's a broad range, but in general, it's like those three. It's like the people that believe it's like part of the organizational culture, people that stand at like a department and say, you're DevOps, like figure it out. And then there's the ones that are kind of like, DevOps, there's a hill over there, let's go towards it, and we'll figure it out on the way. So.
Yep, that's my experience as well. As people grope to understand what this term really means, they throw any sort of organization at it that they can. The healthiest descriptions I've seen regarding organization, and we'll talk about at the end, we have fun references, but there's a great book called The Phoenix Project, and that book kind of lays out the idea of organization and DevOps as, when you say that, it's about creating a less siloed, more communicative organization. So, but most companies just kind of throw things at the wall. When they say DevOps, it could be anything. So, what is a DevOps department? So like, what's your department, George?
Yeah, tech ops, right? And we did go round and round on like, should it be DevOps? And it isn't. We're not. There's no like the idea of having the. It's almost like having having a person that's responsible for like your culture. It's like, all right, we have a cultural ambassador like that when it's actually supposed to be responsibility of the organization to develop the culture as a whole. And the DevOps department sometimes just becomes the bucket of like, you are the DevOps and figure it out. Sometimes it's healthy. Sometimes the DevOps department is actually an integrated cross-functional team that works across all the organizations, and it actually works. And they just happen to call themselves DevOps because it was easy, and operations was taken by the delivery team or sysadmins, so they had to use DevOps. It varies broadly depending on where you land.
Yeah, and it varies broadly based also on not just sort of when it was made and your duties within the organizational structure, but it also varies based on what your company actually does and what it delivers. So when we think of DevOps, a lot of people think of, and we'll get to tools and stuff later, they think of this is a group that is automating putting a web app on a server in a cloud, right? So they have to have this idea of automation. They have to understand the basics of systems engineering because they have to put together the full system that creates this web application as people know it. And, there's delivery within this idea of like software as a service as a web app. But there's also organizations and companies where the thing you're delivering is not a web application. So like a game company, you might be delivering the game itself. And at the same time, they'll say that they have a DevOps department, and that department's job is the build and release pipeline of that game to their storefront, whatever their storefronts may be. It might be their own storefront, it might be Steam and GOG and whatever it is, right? So there's also that, is what is a DevOps department is kind of like, well, they're the department that makes sure whatever the product that this company is making ends up kind of where it's supposed to be. Shrug.
Yeah, which is sometimes synonymous with operations. Like it's kind of the previous organization I was in, they called it WebOps. So yeah, and that was very much about delivering platforms for people to create web experiences. So yeah.
Was that department formed due to some roadblocks? I mean, what was the impetus for
WebOps or tech ops? Which one?
Yeah, like in your experience, what challenges were you guys experiencing that led you to form a DevOps department?
So in my previous role, the WebOps department and organization was, I don't know if everyone's aware of what Adobe Experience Manager is. It's a content management system. It's a platform. And, the people that work on it are very expensive. So that WebOps organization was actually created to concentrate AEM management expertise into a pool to create a platform that everyone could develop on. So we became like WebOps became like the AEM platform services department, where we spun up, we put AEM inside of OpenShift, put inside of PCF, like our Pivotal Cloud Foundry, did all these things to make it so people could use AEM quickly, which sounds a lot like DevOps stuff, but that was created because instead of every separate place that needed to create an AEM experience, they just said, okay, we need to concentrate this expertise because it's super expensive and it's hard to find people to do it. So let's do that. So that was one reason. Where I am now, the practice lead, our managing director, pretty much says this was done in self-defense, which is interesting because it was a very much an old school operations team beforehand. And the automation came in self-defense because they were always just rolling bad code and it was always breaking everything, and they were always on fire. So they had to figure out a way to make the delivery system to get healthier stuff to wherever it needed to go. So the organization was created, the Tech Ops organization, which was called something else before I got there. I forget what it was. I know that they claimed that their mascot was the dung beetle because they rolled crap all day long. But whatever that organization was, whatever that organization was, in self-defense, they became what we are now, and that was one of the reasons I was brought on, to help with a lot of that stuff, but that's why it was self-defense. So there's different reasons.
Yeah, and the three DevOps types of organizations I've been in, they started for kind of different reasons. The first one I started in at Akamai was a team that started to automate the delivery of their web portal. So that is a web application, and they wanted to get to a point where they were getting something a little bit closer to continuous integration so that developers could make changes and get them pushed and tested much more quickly. The Akamai networks and the way software had been built and tested there is a very slow process, very slow. So that team got started with that specific task. How do we get developers' code built and into a test pipeline quickly so that they can actually develop faster, get more features out to customers, and fix bugs faster. So that was why that was done. The next org had been at Akamai since kind of the beginning. It was the main developer productivity group. They ran the larger build system, release tracking, all of that stuff. And I was brought in specifically because I'd worked on this other team doing continuous integration to start getting the main company's stuff to go the same route. So standing up the tools they would need to start doing that, working on building an actual pipeline so that people could check in code and then have jobs automatically built and all of that. So same kind of idea. They needed to get something where they're able to deliver products faster and less expensively, hopefully. And then at Canonical with the cloud team, it's the same thing. It's about being able to take changes to a distro when they happen and get an image out to the clouds as quickly as possible so that people who are spinning up new instances of Ubuntu are getting the latest thing from Ubuntu. They don't have to spin up that instance and then do apt-get update, apt-get dist upgrade, and install 100 packages, and it's going to take 10 minutes, and they don't want that, right? Like if someone is spinning up a service and they're going for something that's more continuous, they need that server to come up immediately. So Canonical built an entire group to make sure that we create these images that boot quickly, are always updated, and are available and safe, secure, and all of that. So I think a lot of what DevOps comes down to is how do we do something faster and cheaper?
Yeah.
How do you measure DevOps skills?
I wanted to, so real quick for the titles, a lot of times they slap, like they take titles that exist and they just slap DevOps onto it. Oh, you're an engineer, now you're a DevOps engineer. Oh, you're an enterprise architect, now you're a DevOps architect. Right. And all I would say for that is, I don't know. I'm assuming people here are interested in getting in the field, are in the field and want to know more or whatever. I would say that the DevOps in the title is tough because I wouldn't just search for DevOps engineer jobs or DevOps sysadmin jobs because the skills that you need, like if you're a solutions architect, you probably know some DevOps stuff. If you're an engineer, you probably know some DevOps stuff. Just knowing what DevOps is and as John said, knowing how to get stuff done quicker and cheaper, it's only going to help you add value to the organization. So it's all the legacy titles, plus DevOps slapped on titles, plus some other stuff. Like if you're interested in getting into a QA, knowing how to do that faster and cheaper using methodologies that come as part of the DevOps culture, it's only going to add more value. So I would say the titles is much broader than just searching for DevOps on LinkedIn or Glassdoor or Ladder or wherever it is you're looking.
Yeah, and there's some other keywords if I see this with QA more, so it'll be like QA automation jobs. So that's more of a DevOps role. So it's not just writing testing, it's also automating all of the tests. We just hired someone in that role where it's like, okay, you're hired as a software engineer, because we expect everyone to be a generalist at Canonical. So everyone's hired as software engineers, you're expected to be generalists. But this person's primary role is, okay, we have testing already, but we need to better automate all of the different places, and that's going to be your job. Like, you need to help us automate all of our testing. So look for things that say automation instead of just DevOps. There's some very specific-y things that have come out of this trend, like SREs, or site reliability engineers, as a title. That's mostly often tied to cloud type jobs. And that's kind of a byproduct, strange little title that people have come up with.
People being Google.
Yes, people being Google.
Yeah, so that's a big company to be like, hey, we're going to make something, so they made something. So SRE is definitely a Google thing, and it's important.
Yeah. So how do we measure DevOps skills?
This is a tough one, and the reason it's tough is because I've hired, I think, 6 people in the last 6 months, and I've interviewed 30, I don't know, a lot, maybe a lot of people. So, in a short hour-long conversation, I have to figure out what kind of skills they're going to bring to add value to my organization, right? Like, what are you bringing in? What are you going to help us with? So, for us, DevOps skills, we don't even ask about DevOps in our interview. We don't ask about any of those things. A lot of the stuff we ask about is, how do you handle communication? Are you good with cross-organizational interactions? How do you escalate? How do you manage when you have a problem? How many questions do you ask? Those types of things. So that's all around communication. So I think when people when we think of DevOps skills, I don't think of, I can make a Jenkins file that works the first time writing it from my head, and it automatically spins up a pipeline for me. Great. But that is automation, which is important. Orchestration and automation, super important technical skills. But the DevOps part of it is, okay, but can you explain it to the QA department? Can you explain it to the developers? Can you make it so it can sit in their repository and they know how to manage it themselves? Those are the skills that we look for. And can you just write a script? Do you know a language well enough to say, hey, I can hammer out something that'll do something automatically for me? So those are the questions we ask to measure DevOps skills.
Yep, 100%. Same thing. Canonical, my team's been hiring for the past few months. I've done at least as many interviews as you, George, which is hilarious because that tells you how many more people applied for my job, I guess. But it's the majority of what we're after is the same things. We want to know about your interpersonal skills. How do you talk to people? How do you manage relationships? How do you manage people? And we do have technical stuff. Because of the nature of our job, we try and make our technical questions very specific to the kinds of things you would do every day. So there's a basic question on, hey, can you write a script type thing that interacts with this web API? So we do Trello. So it's like, hey, can you write something that interacts with Trello, and can you do these steps? And that's the type of thing we do every day. And then the other one is we present a real problem that we had to deal with. So we have an answer, but it's not the only answer. There's lots of ways to approach this problem, lots of ways to deal with it. And that, funny enough, that technical problem is not about solving the problem, because we know no one will solve it in an hour. It's about how do you communicate how you're going to solve it, how you're going to, like, how you approach a problem, how you tell other people about this problem and communicate out all of the design stuff. Again, at Canonical, everyone's a generalist and everyone's expected to be a fairly high-level software engineer, just generally. And we give that test in Python, but that's mainly because 90% of our code is Python and Bash. It doesn't disqualify you if you get in there and be like, Python's not my first language, can I pseudocode half of this? We actually shrug and say, yes, that's fine. It's more about how you approach the problem. So again, even that's more about problem solving and communication than it is how good of a Python programmer are you. But soft skills are hard to measure as well. So, all right, let's talk about the culture of DevOps. Is it a culture? Is it a department? Culture. It's the Kauffman Center. So what does DevOps mean for how we work?
I know that what we like, just how we described how we measure it is what it means, right? So if anyone's interested in getting into the field, like, it's collaborative. That's how we work. Like, it's no longer you take a sprint worth of tickets, disappear, and come back at the end of the sprint and move all your tickets to in QA or whatever. It doesn't. Now it's very much like, I submit PRs on the code I write, if it's infrastructure as code or any kind of code, and it actually gets peer reviewed, and it's collaborative, and it can be peer reviewed by developers. If it impacts QA, they can peer review it. So it's extremely like everything we mentioned about the skills feeds right into like how we work.
Yeah, it's for how we work. It means we're the bridge between lots of organizations. So we're the group that's bringing together, at Canonical, it would be the kernel team, the server team. So kernel team owns the Linux kernel development. The server team owns server-side software as supplied by Canonical directly, things like Cloud Init. That's owned by the server team. And also the general idea of what a server image is owned by the server team. And we come from that. The cloud images come from the server image. But we keep kernel, server, and then our partners. So all of the big clouds, we're the communication line, and we actually own those lines of communication. Like, it is specifically our job to own the communication with the with our customer is not the right word. I'm not supposed to say customer. With our partners, I own that. You own the relationship with the partners, and you own the communication with server and kernel as related to delivering this product. And honestly, that's a huge amount of what our work is. There is obviously technical stuff, but it means we focus on that cultural and communication part almost more than the technical.
Yeah. I mean, these are the, like, if you are interested in the field, if you're in the field and you want to get promoted or grow, these are the things, like the titles, the how we measure and how we work are the things. Does anyone have any questions around any of that stuff? I mean, that is kind of those are the big things. All right, everyone's killing it.
Yeah.
Communication.
Yeah, I'll say if you know how to run a meeting efficiently and actually get information from everyone and delegate, you will go far. You will go very. I have risen at Canonical to owning 2 cloud accounts in less than a year because of those skills. Not because I'm technically better than anyone else on the team. I'm definitely not. But I have a background as a teacher. So leading a meeting and a discussion is normal.
Yeah.
doing that for a decade. Is there a cultural shift needed for DevOps? I'm just going to say yes, honestly. Big yes, because coming from a much older organization like Akamai, everything was very siloed. A developer did their work, they put it in a bucket, and then at a certain point during a cycle, someone from QA would go to that bucket, get the thing, and do their testing. And then at a certain point when QA said they were done, it would go to the ops people, and their job would be to put it into production. And so everything was extremely siloed. There was very little communication, and that's where the cultural shift happened in the first organization I worked for, was breaking that all down so that QA and developers were not just communicating, but were able to communicate because things were in places where they could communicate. So moving things from closed repositories where QA couldn't see them to more open repositories where everyone related to that project through the whole pipeline could see them. Using tools and putting things in places where everyone could get to them on a regular basis so they could continuously be testing and talking. And that was a big cultural shift for how Akamai worked, because that's old companies really silo off. So yeah, I'm gonna say it's needed.
If as a counterpoint to that, like if you're interviewing for a position or you're looking at a job, and one of the questions you can ask them is, is the DevOps team, is it integrated? Is it like are we an add-on to other groups, or is it cross-functional teams, or I'm actually on the team to delivering stuff? Someone figured out how to raise their hand. Still don't know how to do it. But what I would say though is if the company already has a transparent culture, if they are transparent, like repos are open, people see everything and they're transparent. And if the company has a communicative, cross-functional culture, then they probably wouldn't need a cultural shift to implement DevOps methodologies. But if they don't have that, then it would critically hamper them if they wanted to do it. What's your question, Jeremy?
Yeah, just like John, you mentioned the silos. So does that mean bringing possibly ops people into the sprint meetings? That kind of.
Oh yeah, that was a big part of it. Is so I think part of it also is that it depends on how you organize around methodologies as far as that goes, right? So if you're doing Agile, which I think I added that a little bit later, is Agile part of this even? But if you're doing sprints and the idea is things are delivered on this sort of basis, then yes, those people should be in those meetings, because the ops people need to know what's coming through the pipeline, how it's coming through the pipeline. They need to know. That was one of the last things that got added actually to that organization, was the last group that wasn't in those meetings that needed to be there were the support people. So what was happening is changes were getting released, and support was hearing about the change that was getting released at the same time the customers were, which you have to think isn't always fantastic. So yeah, that's also part of it, is everyone does need to maybe not be specifically in the meeting, but all of the communication documentation has to be done in a way where everyone related to that product can see it and work with it and ask questions on it.
Thank you.
So if you think about it though, just to put a sharper point on it, is one of the things you're like, wait a minute, that's impossible. Like, everyone can't be at a giant meeting about my application, because that's everyone, and that's 150 people talking about nothing would get done. How do you make that work? So this actually feeds really well into domain-driven design, where you have a domain, there's a chunk of stuff that you're working on delivering that has it's all inclusive, and that's that's a cross-functional team that's delivering that domain. And the team should consist of people testing it, people getting it out the door, people doing all these things. So if you're thinking, wait a minute, The team that builds Ubuntu all in a room for stand-ups sounds ridiculous. Yes, that does sound ridiculous. But the team that has a specific domain that builds something that goes into Ubuntu, talking about it and getting it out the door so the rest of the team can function properly and communicating that out, that is what you're aiming for. Just something to keep in mind, because a lot of people get bogged down, like, that's impossible, we can't do it. We'll keep QA over there and we'll send them emails when we need stuff. So just, keep that in mind.
And even just being good about delegation and then trusting people to communicate outwards. So like our partner meetings, everyone on my team works on every cloud eventually in a sense, right? But we have one owner per meeting and then a backup. So there's always two people from our team there, but that's it. So when I have a meeting with Oracle, it's me and one other person. And then we have one, maybe two people from kernel. And then no one from server really shows up unless there's something very specific on the meeting for them. Otherwise, they go to the shared notes or they wait for us to talk to them. And then we have, from our side, one other person who usually shows up. We have a technical account manager who helps keep track of all of the tickets that our partners open for us for like specific bugs or feature requests. So they help us keep track of those public tickets and kind of help facilitate everything. But that's, we're talking from the canonical side, maybe 6 people, and only 3 of those people are actually speaking from the canonical side. It'll be me and then the one kernel representative and then the TAM. And then the same thing happens with our partners. They only send 1 or 2 people to those meetings, and then they communicate out everything else outward. And if we need more people in a meeting, we schedule another meeting with specific people. So like, okay, we have this problem and it's related to specifically the compute platform team. Okay, let's schedule a meeting with, again, just a max of like 5 or 6 people, and get this, a couple delegates from their team, a couple delegates from our team into a room and just talk about it. And that's how you do it. It's not everyone in the room, it's subgroups of everyone, and then put all the notes and the documentation in a public place and then tap more people as it's needed. We've kind of talked about it. Huh?
I think we just described it.
Yeah, I think we just described it.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah. Lots of smaller groups, not big, not everybody. Lots of small groups. You delegate stuff out and then communicate to everyone else on the team as you need to, which,
One of my favorite parts of that culture is I have all parts of the organization walking up to my desk. Like, it's not just developers that are on my team or infrastructure engineers that are on my team. It is everybody. It could be the project managers. It could be the business analysts. It could be, because we're all on the same page, the same team. And so I'm not just working in my own stack. It's great. Like, that's what it looks like in reality.
Yep. Same thing. Like I recently got to work a lot with a very specific product team that is limited release now in the company. I'd have to look up. I never remember what is open in public and what's not anymore because I deal with too many things. But I think this is public. They've done presentations. There's something called NBox, which is being driven by Canonical. It's Android emulation, very fast server. Spin this up. It has all of your Android stuff in it, so you can quickly do build and test against, develop against Android. So you can start building Android apps in a cloud environment without having to spin up a ton of stuff yourself. You just, buy this one product. There it is. It spins up for you. It's there. So I've been working with them, which is fantastic. New product line, brand new stuff. I know nothing about it, but that gets me working with an entirely new team that I had never gotten to work with. So that's great. There's so much crossing of stuff. Okay, I brought this up, so I'll start. Is DevOps Agile? Are they the same thing? Are they related? So Agile methodology, short breakdown, there's something called the Agile Manifesto. It's like 15 rules for doing stuff. They're all like one sentence kind of things. That's been now kind of adopted into a cottage industry around how to deliver software in a continuous fashion. So this is where terms like sprints and Kanban boards and all that comes from, different Agile methodologies. So DevOps itself is not directly Agile in the sense of they are separate domains, if you will. They're not the exact same thing, but they're related in a lot of different ways. A lot of teams and organizations that say they do DevOps also do Agile methodologies. It kind of goes hand in hand. If you're going to automate and move things through, you're probably going to be doing more of an Agile methodology than the classic was called waterfall, where you design everything up front and then you develop everything for 6 months and then you release everything and then you do it all over again. You can think of that for like big software suites when they release, like, oh, it's whatever version 1.0 is finally out and it took us a year. Like, that's more of a waterfall. What you see as a customer is waterfall. They might not be doing that internally, but you can think of it that way. Everything is done on one end and then something comes out at the end. That's the product. That's a huge release and it takes a long time. So they're related. They're not the same thing. Add anything to that, George?
No, I agree. I would just say that I think the biggest thing is that DevOps methodology allow you to release your thing when it's ready, without having to release everything and wait for everything to be ready. And that's modern software architecture. That's kind of the idea. And DevOps enables that. And Agile is how you track all of that. It's a methodology to help track all of that. But DevOps would help on a monolith also. Like, if you were going to do a waterfall monolith, it would still help. Like, the methodologies would still help with that. So
yeah.
So they're not the same, but they both are. Yeah.
Yeah. There's
If you're going to get a DevOps job, you probably want to be able to answer the question, what is Agile? And you know how it works. I mean, that's a good question to know how to answer if you want a DevOps job.
Yeah, totally. And there's so many variations of what is Agile and what is quote unquote waterfall, what is, a software development life cycle, if you're going to approach it from the really broad term, and the way to track a software development life cycle. I turned and looked because I was trying to see if I have the book in front of me, but I don't. The guy who wrote Code Complete, McConnell, has another book called Agile Methodologies. That's a really good book, and it's about realistic ways of how this works in how Agile methodologies work in practice versus just reading the manifesto or thinking of a pure form of it. Okay, what about DevSecOps? Because that's the new buzz.
People are taking, so DevOps is getting tacked onto titles, and then everyone's taking their concerns and tacking it onto DevOps, which is, that's really how you make something successful. Actually, it's horrible. You bog it down and everything else. Now, DevSecOps is a rapidly growing, well-paying field. I'm not sure how well defined it is, though. So if you're interested in security and you're interested in security that is, uses DevOps methodologies, like being able to spin up secure containers or using containers to run tests against other containers, all of the stuff, being able to validate your code as far left for security as you can. I mean, it's not a bad area to look into. But as far as the title itself goes, our statement on security is we believe that security should be a part of everything. So yeah, but why call it out? Shouldn't quality be a part of everything? Like, you have Dev QA ops. I mean, so it's just, it's another niche that is interesting to target.
Yeah, it's I brought it up because it is such a buzzword and people are hiring specific DevSecOps things, but it's really falls into a couple places. It is, security within things that are delivery methods for DevOps people now. So there's a lot of container security. So if you like Docker or you like Kubernetes or something like that, when they say DevSecOps, they're probably talking Kubernetes more than anything. But there's also by far left with security, scanning and security, it means the left is the developer. So the person working on the code is the furthest left, and the furthest right is the customer. And then everything in the middle of that spectrum. So can you create a process in a way for the developer to know early on if there's a security problem with what they're writing? So there's lots of specific tools for that, which we'll get to the next slide. But the specific tools that help do that, they do security scanning. Some of them are built into the package managers themselves. So if you work in JavaScript, you might know about npm, the node package manager, and then that has a built-in command that will just tell you, okay, you use these packages, I checked our database, do any of those packages and versions of packages have known vulnerabilities or not? So being able to add that in is a big value to organizations, how you can get security on the code end as early as possible. So let's tools. Not to be confused with DevOps. Oh, there's a cloud. There's Jenkins. That one, Ansible. What about that one? Terraform. YAML. Everything's YAML now, right? Juju, that's the one probably no one knows, but it's actually really, really cool. That's a canonical product. Same space as Ansible and Terraform, honestly. Sonatype makes tools related to archive management and security. So where do you put those things that just got built, and how do you make sure they're secure? JFrog, same thing. I'll do a little plug about something related to JFrog at the end of this. Does it mean Cloud or Jenkins, George? Does it?
No, it means neither. But you're probably going to want to know how to answer a question about, do you have any experience doing anything in a public cloud? I mean, that's a good question to answer. And if you haven't worked in Jenkins, being able to say, oh, you know what? I believe Jenkins has some pretty blatant security vulnerabilities unless it's patched routinely. So I prefer to be cloud native and use things like Cloud Builder that come with any cloud provider that you want. Like an answer like that at an interview would be like, I don't care if they know Jenkins, like they know how to automate cloud native and they know what I'm talking about. So, that type of thing. So Jenkins is not like DevOps.
Right. It's really, you can break this into two areas. Does it mean cloud? Meaning, does it mean public cloud servers and their specific offerings? So how they deal with virtual machines, how they might deal with Kubernetes, all those things. Does DevOps mean that? No, because you can deliver anything anywhere. And Jenkins, really the question is automation. Like, is it about automation? Yeah. Automation is a big part of what DevOps is, but it doesn't mean this specific tool. It gets thrown about a lot as the tool, but there's so many automation tools out there. You don't have to know Jenkins. It is useful to know one, even if it's GitHub Actions. Like, that's a great place to start. You got GitHub. How can I use GitHub Actions on my code base to make it run my unit tests for me? Right? But no, definitely doesn't mean those things. What should I learn to show I have DevOps skills? YAML?
Communication. I think so. One of the questions we ask is, can you describe a problem you solved and how you communicated it to the rest of the organization? Like for us, that is like a way to demonstrate what we would consider some DevOps skills. Another one is, can you describe a problem that you solved with a script and how did you manage that script? That's another one that we ask. So like, we don't even say, Bash, Go. Like, we don't even tell you Python. It's just like, did you ever solve a problem with a script, and how did you manage it? Like, you're like, oh, I wrote PowerShell and it solved my problem, and then I threw the script away. That is the okay answer. A better answer would be, I wrote PowerShell and I committed it to GitHub so everyone else could see it and work from the same, use it the same, that solve that problem again. That's a better answer. So that's how a lot of it is, understanding how to communicate with the tools and be transparent with the tools that that we have listed here, and not even these, just transparency.
Yeah, 100% agree. Learn, in a general sense, I'll say learn some sort of scripting language. It doesn't matter what one. There's tons. Python, Bash, PowerShell, Ruby, Go, I don't care. Feel comfortable writing simple scripts that can automate something for you. And then learn what to do with those things. So how do you use source control? I don't care what one. How do you, if you build software like with a binary like Go or Python, you want to share it, how do you get that out further? That's kind of like the next level. It's like, okay, you know how to script. Oh, you also know how to get something into PyPy and share it in that sense. Well, that means some packaging. That's cool. That's but that's kind of the next, that shows you're kind of an advanced user to me. If you can do Python packaging or packaging in whatever language and get it somewhere, that's kind of an advanced thing in my mind, because it's not always easy. Is there a DevOps toolbox? I mean, YAML.
YAML again. I would say, pick something that you're interested in. Like, if you want to automate infrastructure, work with Terraform, work with Plumbee, work with Ansible, work with whatever, and just figure out how to store and share that code and test it, and then you've got something in your toolbox. It's hard for me, in all of the places I've been, all toolbox. So there is no, I think we lost John. But I'm sure everyone here knows something, like some kind of scripting language, and so that's in your toolbox. I would say that the best thing to go in your toolbox is some of this stuff here, where to go for information. Like, if your toolbox is actually a placeholder for all the places you can go to get information, to learn about things. I mean, the books you get, I think those should be in your toolbox. Jenkins, yeah, but is it? I mean, no, I don't think. If you know it, great, but I would prefer that you understand what goes into automation than knowing the ins and outs of Jenkins, unless I had a specific client that wanted Jenkins. But we're at the end, so we've got sites here, and I think there's one more that's books. So any questions? You can just come off mute and start talking.
Yeah, George, this might be too broad of a question. I'm just trying to understand it. So let's say there's a DevOps department. Do you find that they more have an ops background or more a developer background? Or
I would hope they're both. I will say that the best teams I've been on come from both sides. Like, if we've got front-end developers got interested in DevOps and came down from front end, and if we've got sysadmins or ops people that came up that end, they are the best teams to work on when you have both, because they both come with their own perspectives that are amazing when they get together. So the best ones have both. And I would say, hopefully it's not a department. Hopefully it's a team that has both on it, or a team that has, the idea would be to have a person that's supplying that functionality to a cross-functional team, and then they go back to their area and they'd be like, hey, I'm working with a front-end thing. You're a front-end guy, but you do our stuff too. Can you explain to me some of these things? Those are the best teams.
Oh, I got you. So they're not necessarily just one team. They might be from other teams that they get together. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So if you think of it as more of a practice, like a cross-functional practice, like, I have a group that has the expertise needed to deliver these things, but they're on other teams. Like, they're supporting other clients around these teams, so they can come back to our group that has front-end experience, back-end experience, all sorts of experience, and get more information from the group. At the end of the day, they're back working on their cross-functional team, delivering the functionality that they need to deliver their product.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I disappeared there for a second. We had our dog had to go to the emergency vet yesterday, and I thought I heard her fall down, but I didn't. She just kind of ambled into something lightly, so she's fine.
Were there any other questions? Is helpful? Anyone say, I learned something I didn't know, or this is pretty much what I thought to be true? Because I'm always curious to know, like, what I get very down in my own rabbit hole and feel like everyone should know these things. And then when I talk about it, sometimes it's like, no, not everyone knew these things. So.
I guess for someone who, my name is Ike, by the way.
Hey,
yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
But for someone who is not, trying to get into the industry of software development as a whole, where do you suggest the person starts? Because I don't know exactly what your journey is to into DevOps, what your roles before the current role you have now was. So I'm kind of trying to understand, for someone who is new, what should be my first step or steps.
So okay, so I'll jump in. So my first job in tech was on a DevOps type team, but I was essentially an application administrator. There was we ran on-premises Bitbucket, so that's Atlassian's Git-based source control. And my job started with, okay, we're gonna hire you. We're gonna teach you more basic Linux stuff because I didn't know a ton. We're gonna work on your Python skills, but your main job is you're gonna deal with this application and add users, add projects, the kind of day-to-day stuff. And then it was, okay, how do you automate that job away so that you're not going and clicking through this web application all the time? So you get 5 users asking you for a license in the morning, you run a script in the morning, and it's done. So that to me is kind of the ultimate starting point to how to get into DevOps. Is you have something, it doesn't matter what, you have something that you do manually every day. It could be in like your normal day-to-day life, and you find a way to automate it. That to me is the ultimate beginning. Say if you here's a fun one. So I run a Minecraft server on a Raspberry Pi. It's in my house. I got this Raspberry Pi that primarily I got for work, but I don't need it for work all the time, and so when I'm not using it for work, it's running Minecraft. How do I deal with that server? What happens to it on a day-to-day basis? Are there backups? How do I make sure this thing's going to be available? What happens if the SD card goes bad and I have to reinstall from scratch? Those are things you can think of as like, well, how do I solve that? And then how do I write a basic script in whatever language I feel like learning, so that I can manage this, so I never have to go back in to the terminal and like hand type all these commands or copy paste from whatever website I got it from the first time. So that's a good starting point.
Yeah, and I think it's a good way to discover if you enjoy it, right? I mean, you do, in order to really be successful, you're going to want to have that sense of like, holy crap, it did something for me. Like, I made something that did something for me. I mean, if you don't get that, like if that's not something, then and that's not everybody, right? So you want to make sure, because the same thing. So I started out as a photographer back in the day when it was on film, and then we transferred over to digital, and no one knew how to handle metadata. It was like, hey, we've got these images. What do we do with them, and how do we know what they are? So I ended up using Adobe Bridge and writing JavaScript scripts to put metadata on images, and I was like that's how I started. I was like, I was a photographer, but now I'm writing JavaScript scripts in Adobe Bridge to manage metadata on images. And then I realized I like that. I just processed 1,200 images in less than an hour with film that would take 3 weeks. So it's like, I like that. So I kind of like left photography and moved into that. And then I started my journey up through digital asset management, like automation, asset management. And that's when like heavy assets bring you all sorts of interesting problems on how you move them around on servers, like how do you handle network load, like all these things. So that I kind of grew from there. So whatever it is you're doing now, like whatever it is, if you're like, you know what, there's some part of my job that I would like to go faster or I want to automate, see if you enjoy doing it. And if you're like, that sucked, I never want to do that again, then that's cool. That's cool too, at least you know.
Right.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
It also is a fun gap to bridge for like anyone who has gone through a boot camp or is thinking about boot camps or anything like that. A lot of those focus on how to write software. A lot of them focus on how to deal with front-end software primarily, and then a little bit of back-end. And it's like, okay, you've made this web app. How do you get this web app up on a server? And most of them start with something pretty straightforward, like Heroku, where, you know, I have this code in this repository. I can tell Heroku this is JavaScript, and it does what it's supposed to do. And it just, boom, there's my app, and that's fantastic. So then what's the next step? Can you stand that up somewhere else? Okay, I've done it on Heroku where it's push button and it's easy, but can I do that on AWS?
Yeah.
Can I do that on Google Cloud? Can I do that on, you know, a $50 Raspberry Pi in my house?
And am I interested in doing it?
Right.
You know, like, do I like Heroku because I can hit the button and I'm done, and then I walk away? Because that's a whole industry too. There's people that do everything before it gets there. So it's really, you know, you're figuring out what you want to do.
Right.
I saw you came off mute, Cody. Do you have a question?
No, I was just going to comment. The passion in kind of developing, saving time like that is, for me, is can I save clicks? Tendinitis for me flares up really quickly, so I love figuring out solutions where ways in which I can interact with the computer less.
Right. Yep.
And I had, a similar journey where I was, as part of my job, I automate tasks on Photoshop. So I've written JavaScript to basically handle large amounts of images, format them in ways that I need to before uploading online.
Cool. Yeah, it's fun.
In place of, a CMS, I'm basically doing a CMS's job.
Yeah. Back when I was doing it, that stuff didn't exist yet. It was, we were still trying to figure it out. Yeah.
And their API isn't still awesome or full featured, but
yeah,
it's something.
Yeah. We did have one more slide with books on it too, I believe.
Yeah.
So I want to go look at that. And I know we're a little over. Does anyone want to make sure we get everyone's questions, or if anyone has comments or anything else they'd like to address? Now's the time. All right. Quiet group. Well, this was fun. I love talking about this stuff. I don't, so like in our interviews, I don't ask about passion, because I really believe that if you require passion in your full-time job, that is a recipe for burnout. But I do look for curiosity, like, how can I do this better? Like interest and curiosity. So I wouldn't say that you need a passion to get into this field, but you do want to know how things are made, and you want to know how to make them better. And if you're interested in those things, it's a good place to go.
Yeah, I would second that. Our team does not focus on saying, do you have a passion for automating all the things? I tend to say things more like, are you a little bit of a perfectionist? not like are you a hardcore perfectionist, but does something bug you if it's not working quite right, or it's not working as well as you think it should work? Are you curious to find ways to make things work better? That's more what I'm after. I am not a passionate software engineer in the sense of all I think about is software, and when I'm not working my 9 to 5, I'm running these open source things. I'm just coding all day, and that's not me at all. So I look for people more like me. I'm bugged by things when they don't work right. I have a dogged attitude toward making something work in a time frame. So if I say I'm going to have something done in a couple days, I'm going to make sure it's done in a couple days. That doesn't mean I work 40 hours in 2 days. It means that I concentrate on this problem and just this problem. And I know how to tell people I'm working on this problem right now. I hear what you're talking about. I've put it on my list of stuff. I'll get to it in a couple days. So it's setting boundaries. Also, we don't want workaholics. We don't want people who are going to throw themselves into this 20 hours a day. We want people who are calm, want to work through problems diligently and methodically, and tell everyone in a very open way. Canonical's mostly an open source company, so you have to be very comfortable telling people publicly what you're working on and how you're working on it. Not so much my team, because we work with the big clouds, so we're under NDA all the time. That's non-disclosure agreements. But there's a lot of what gets done that can be done publicly and should be done publicly, even if that public is just within your company, and being able to communicate that. So that's the kind of thing people we look for more than anything.
If you're looking for entryways, a lot of the associate specialist levels have no degree requirements in our place. We'll accept launch code, DevOps boot camps, all that stuff, as long as make it through the interview process. We typically work through contractors and stuff like that. So if anyone's interested, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Everyone's hiring and everyone's growing right now, so it's a good time to be in technology. So something to keep in mind.
Yep, and feel free, if you're not already following me on LinkedIn or elsewhere, you can always find my name on the organizer lead, so I'm listed on the meetup. But it's John Chittum. Find me on LinkedIn.